Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of TEDx RWTH Aachen podcast. Today, I'm with the one and only Rob Griffith. How are you?
Good, how are you?
First of all, we're very happy to have you, and we're happy that you accepted our invite. I think the whole TEDx Aachen team was very, very excited for this episode. And I'm very happy that we're going to shoot this episode finally.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, so right now, we're in Aachen, Germany.
We are.
Yes. And you were born in Binghamton, New York.
That's correct.
It's
been a long journey.
It's been a big, long journey. Tell me a little bit about that.
Binghamton is a very beautiful small city in upstate New York, or it's actually called the southern tier of New York. It's about 3 hours by car from New York City. And it's surrounded by forests. It's in a beautiful river valley. There are a couple of rivers there, the Susquehanna and the Shenango rivers. And it was a technology center when I was a child. There were quite a few industries there. IBM had a big facility there. My father worked for a company called Ansco that was associated with AGFA and General Aniline and Film, and they made high-end film products that were used in the first space flights.
Interesting. In 1969.
In the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
Yeah. You mean the first moonshot?
Yes.
What you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
And also there was a company called Link Aviation that made the first flight simulator. And, there were quite a few later on, some of those industries left the area, and so the economy kind of went down. But now that's changing again, so everything changes, right?
You told me before that it was around 100,000 people.
It was more than 100,000. I don't know the exact population, but I think the population dropped when some of the businesses closed there.
Yeah, so you lived your childhood there, maybe the beginning of the teenage years as well in Binghamton, New York.
I did.
And then moved to California.
Yeah, but before I did that, maybe I'd like to talk a little bit about those teenage years.
Sure.
Because it was the early 60s. It was 64, 65, 66. And in 1963, 64, something happened that for my generation was the most, I can't even begin to describe to you how important it was.
Yeah.
And that was two things. One was the Beatles, and the second was Bob Dylan.
Shout out to the Beatles and Bob Dylan.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly these people were bringing an energy and a life and an excitement that, we just couldn't imagine at that time. So it was really, and then a lot of other groups were coming, a lot of other music groups. There were a lot of films coming that a new energy, a new joy, and it was great.
Summer of Love, 1967.
The Summer of Love was in San Francisco in 1967. That was the hippie movement.
Mm-hmm.
And before the hippie movement, there was something called the beatnik movement. And the beatniks were poets, and they were, a lot of them were in New York and in San Francisco. And the hippies sort of came from the beatniks. And they were people that today you would call them counterculture. So the America during the 1950s was very kind of what you would say straight. In many ways, it was very sort of conformist and rigid in many ways. And suddenly these people were coming and they were dressing differently and they were talking differently. And
they were revolutionary in a sense.
In a sense, yeah. I mean, they weren't violent revolutionaries for the most part, but they were revolutionary in terms of the way they were thinking, in terms of the way they were dressing, in terms of their social attitudes and social mores and that kind of thing. So, yeah. And so that was kind of the time that I grew up in. And then in 1967, I got accepted at UCLA, which is a university in Los Angeles, University of California in Los Angeles. And so I moved to Los Angeles during the 60s.
How was that?
That was also amazing. It was really amazing.
First of all, what were you studying? Like, what was the course that you applied for and you were accepted for?
I was in high school. I was in a special program for people who were supposed to be good at math and engineering. And so originally I was planning to study to be an engineer. But when I got to California, I decided to study languages instead. And so I studied French, actually.
You switched from going into the engineering way into the linguistics.
Language, yeah.
What was the turning point? Why did you change, or what influenced you in a way that...
I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
All right.
It's just, I just did. You know?
You told me in that time, around that time,
Yeah.
you started working as a professional musician.
That was a little bit later.
Okay.
At that time, I was a university student. So I was studying, and we were doing all the things that university students do, you know.
Yeah.
Having fun and studying hard. And
our research team is also just a collection of students in university. Are you doing the same thing? Same thing as Rob Griffith was doing in LA as a UCLA student?
Studying and having fun?
Studying and having fun.
All right.
That's what we're talking about, guys.
But not necessarily in that order. I was having fun first and then studying.
Yeah. And after the bachelor's, you told me also
So
yeah.
There's a little bit more to the story. So around that time, I became very interested in yoga. And I started, this guy came to Los Angeles, a guy named Harbhajan Singh. He was a Sikh, and he founded an ashram, a yoga study center in Los Angeles, and I became very involved in that. And I just got really, really interested in yoga. So I started becoming kind of a little bit fanatical about yoga. And so then this was also during the time of the Vietnam War in America. So it was a great time of social unrest. And I didn't really know what I was doing in school. I didn't have a strong sense of direction. But yoga became really interesting to me because sometimes when I would do yoga, things would open up for me. I don't know how to describe it. So I decided to become a yoga teacher. So I actually didn't finish school at that time. I dropped out of school, and I went back to New York, to Binghamton, and I taught yoga for a couple of years. So that was the next phase of my life.
Interesting. And from Binghamton, New York, you went back to California? Or did you stay in Binghamton?
Yeah, I did it for a couple of years, and then there were a few things that I didn't like about the teachings.
About yoga teaching?
About the teacher and the teachings, yeah. I mean, some of the things that I basically have a scientific mind, and some of the things that were being taught about health and how, you know, you can cure your liver and things like that, I just didn't believe it.
Is it a controversial topic at the time? Was it?
It could be controversial, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, the whole culture, we were trying new things. And also, partly because of maybe the war in Vietnam and some other things, people were very distrustful of institutions. They were distrustful of the government. They were distrustful of medical institutions. They were distrustful of educational institutions, sort of like today a lot of people are
exactly,
too.
Yeah.
So people were trying alternate things, and I was trying alternate things.
Now we're talking about we're in the 70s or 80s era.
Yeah, we're in the early 70s. Yeah.
We're in the early 70s.
The teacher was also homophobic and sexist, and I just didn't believe that, you know. I mean, I have lots of gay friends, and I think women are probably smarter than men, so it's hard for me to think that.
That's a statement right there.
So anyway, so I decided to stop doing that. But there are a lot of good things about it, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Did you try any other sport Did you
I didn't really consider it a sport. It was more of a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
I was always interested in running, and I ran, long distance running and things like that.
I'm a gymnast, and to be honest.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
okay.
I was a gymnast since I was like 3 years old, 2.5 actually. That's what my mom tells me. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she told me that the training for me was. That's what she told me. Training was more of an excess of energy, meaning that I would go there and just have this big burst of energy in the training and come after the training relaxed, more in order, more someone who could just concentrate a little bit better. And I think for every mom, this is what they need.
And did it work?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
100%.
So your mother was just being self-serving. She wanted
Yes,
to get you.
yes.
to
She
calm
was
down.
like,
Okay.
"What can I just do to make him calm down a little bit?"
okay.
And she just threw me in the gymnastics
Maybe
course.
my mother needed a little of that from me.
But you found yoga.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So you went back to Binghamton, did some yoga, teaching at Binghamton, and did people fall in love with the idea of?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of
the culture in New York is a little different.
We set up a study center in Binghamton, and there's a big university there. It's called State University of New York in Binghamton, SUNY Binghamton, and a lot of students got involved in it. And as far as I know, some of them continued with it even after I left. So, but anyway, I wanted to do something different. And one of my friends from UCLA, one of my best friends, had moved to San Francisco. And he said, well, why don't you come out here? So I went out there to hang out with him. And there's a neighborhood in San Francisco which is called the Haight-Ashbury. And it's a kind of a famous neighborhood because it's where the hippie movement was born. And I, at that point, was a hippie, basically. I still am, really, except I don't have as much hair anymore. But anyway, so I went out there, and this neighborhood was made famous because a lot of really great musicians and artists lived in that neighborhood and formed groups that became famous. And so it was really an energy center. And so I moved there, and I met, I was walking down the street one day, and I saw a poster on a wall somewhere, and it said, "We're forming a vaudeville group. Come and join us in this vaudeville group."
A vaudeville.
Vaudeville.
With a V.
With a V. It's a kind of musical theater. It was popular in the 1920s or something like that. And I said, oh, it's the 1970s. We can do it again, right?
Yeah.
So I auditioned for this vaudeville group. I was playing the guitar and singing
bass or
guitar, just and I got involved in this little theater group, and it was a lot of fun. And I met some really cool people in this theater group. And then they spun off and formed another theater group called Rollover Alice, and I met some more people through that group, and it was just incredible. There's a lot of very talented people, a lot of artistic people, a lot of theater people, and they would build, sets, and they would make costumes, and we would rehearse, and we would perform and write songs, and it was really an incredible experience.
I would like to ask a question quickly about how a scientific mind is drawn into so many artistic hobbies.
Probably today, if I were a child today, I would probably be diagnosed with something.
Yeah.
ADHD
Unfortunately,
or something.
This is. But how would you describe this relationship in your mind of having always scientific relationship with the materials that you work with, but also so many artistic hobbies?
I'm a little bit tangential. Whatever the next bright shiny thing is, I go chasing after it. It's just the way my mind works.
Okay.
For better or worse. So, I mean, it's in a way, it means that I tend to not go in a straight line. I'm like a sailboat. To get to the goal, I go left, and then I go right, and then I go left.
But we end up at the goal.
I end up, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. I haven't got there yet. I'll let you know if I get there.
Please. And now we go back to university.
Yeah. That was later.
Okay. I'm still tuned.
Yeah. So I'm living in San Francisco, and then I met some people that were involved in playing music in pubs. It was basically Irish and country music and rock and roll and things.
But we're still in San
Francisco.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of Irish pubs. There's a big Irish community in San Francisco. And the nice thing about the Irish community there is that they love music, and they'll actually pay you to play music. So I ended up playing music with some friends of mine in these pubs, in these Irish pubs in San Francisco. And for a while, I was able to make a living at it, so just playing music. It was not a very good living. I was basically a starving musician, as they say, but it was fun.
Yeah.
But at some point, I realized that I needed to make more money. So I took a special course. My life again takes another tack.
And we're here for it.
Yeah. I took a class in psychiatric technician, it's called. It's like a psychiatric aide. So I learned how to be a psychiatric aide. And I got a job working in the city psychiatric hospital in San Francisco. So I did that for a while. So I worked.
What do you work, or what's your job as a psychiatric aide?
Technician. Well, the ward was locked, and the people who were there were very seriously mentally ill. They had schizophrenia, mostly schizophrenia and manic depressive. There were some other people, but most of them had those two diagnoses.
Mm.
And I was the low man on the totem pole. So basically, my job was to clean up after people and to make sure they got their medications and things like that. So
and this was difficult? Was this?
It was very stressful.
Yeah.
It was very stressful because they call it revolving door therapy. Basically, they would stabilize people so they'd get them back on their medications, which are, Thorazine or Haldol, things like that. And they would, once they were stabilized, they would put them back out, and then they would stop taking their meds, and then 2 months later,
they would just come back in.
Yeah. So.
And this is not a healthy cycle.
No.
Yeah.
It was very, very stressful and very sad.
And would you see the same patients again and again and again, just coming in and coming out and going out? Yeah.
So it was difficult. There were some interesting things. There were a few people that I met there. There was a guy there who worked there who had this similar job as mine, and he was also a very good guitarist. And we became friends and played some music together, and we're still friends today. So this is many, many years.
Is he also in San Francisco now?
No, he lives in Reno, Nevada now.
Interesting.
He moved to Reno because there's a lot of work for musicians.
And he still has his love for music up until this point.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And in Reno, they have the casinos, so they have musicians. So it's a good place to live if you're a musician.
Definitely.
Anyway, and there was another woman who worked there. There's a famous athlete in San Francisco named O.J. Simpson. He was a football player and movie star, and his mother worked there. So
at the psychiatric.
Yeah, she was also a psychiatric aide, and this is before the
fame.
Of course, O.J. there was a big scandal with him. So, which I won't really talk about, but she was a very nice lady. So, and she would cook for the patients sometimes. She would
That's
make
cute.
Jambalaya. Do you know what jambalaya is?
I have no idea.
It's sort of like paella. It's like paella from Louisiana. Anybody heard of it? There's a song, famous. You like paella, then you would love jambalaya. It's kind of there's a song called Jambalaya. You should go listen to the song.
We'll check it out.
We can put it at the end of the podcast.
Yes, in the description.
So anyway, so I did that for a while, and then I just couldn't do that anymore. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to school, finish up my bachelor's degree, get my master's degree, and just, do it. So a friend of mine was studying to get his master's in teaching English as a foreign language. And in San Francisco, they have a university there called San Francisco State University. And I thought, well, this is a good program for me. I'm interested in languages. So I went back to school. I finished up my bachelor's in French, and then I went on and got my master's in teaching English. And to finance that, during that time, I was still playing music, but I was also working in a bookstore in the Haight-Ashbury. And that was a really cool bookstore to work in because being in San Francisco, a lot of famous people would come into the bookstore. The actor and comedian Robin Williams would come in sometimes.
Robin Williams.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
He came in one time and he came up to buy some books, and I said, he took out his credit card, and I said, "Excuse me, sir, do you have any ID?" And he started to reach for his ID, and I said, "Just kidding." He kind of scowled at me. He didn't know. And there were, quite a few famous people who came in, and sometimes they would write books and they would sign them, and I would get to talk to them and stuff. So that was really fun for me. Actors and musicians and things like that.
Do you remember the most interesting talk with a celebrity that you had in the bookstore?
In the bookstore? There's a actress named Kathy Baker. You might not know her name, but you've probably seen her in some movies. And I used to talk to her quite often, and I really enjoyed that. There's a singer named Joan Baez. I don't know if anybody's heard of Joan Baez. She was like the biggest, she was like the Taylor Swift of my generation. She was just a massively great singer. She's still alive. She later became romantically involved with Bob Dylan, and she came in the bookstore, and I got to talk to her for a while. She was really great. She's a super lady, and she's just an amazing singer, musician, and also a political activist for peace and things like that.
Interesting.
So she was a great person. Kind of a hero of mine also. She had a big influence on my life, even before I talked to her.
Shout out to her.
So anyway, I'm working in this bookstore, and I'm finishing up my master's, and then I finished up my master's, and I was working there for a while longer, and in around 1985, a friend of mine, the same friend that I came to San Francisco originally to visit, got interested in computers. And he bought a computer called an Amiga, like friend in Spanish, girlfriend in Spanish, right? Amiga computers were the coolest computers in 1985. They were cooler than Macintoshes. They were cooler than Ataris. And the reason they were cool is because they had a graphics card or a graphics chip and an audio chip, which other computers really didn't have at that time. And what it meant was that you could do graphics on your screen, and you could do sound and audio, which compared to what you can do today, it was pretty primitive, but it was still really, really, really cool for 1985. Amiga is made by Commodore, which is the same company that made the Commodore 64, which was like the first popular home computer. And keeping in mind that at this time there wasn't like an internet, right? So, you would buy this computer and you would, there was an internet, but it was used by the military. It was called DARPA or ARPA or something like that. It was like you could use it maybe for text messaging or things like that, but
nothing for the public.
There was no World Wide Web yet, right? So anyway, I got this computer, and it sucked my brain out. It sucked right out of my eyeballs. And I just got so interested in this thing, and so a hippie woman, opened this little computer store in San Francisco where she was selling these Amiga computers. And she offered me a job. And I was supposed to be the quote unquote, she had one guy who was the video expert who was using this computer to make videos. And I was the music expert. So I was supposed to know everything about music. And I was writing some magazine articles for magazines about this computer and how to use it and things like that. And it was a lot of fun. And as a result of that, I met some people from Japan.
One moment. Let's just talk about the store for a second.
Okay.
Do we know the hippie lady? Is she like popular or maybe?
She's not famous. Her daughter has actually become somewhat famous as a violin player playing Irish music. Her daughter's name is Athena Tergis, and she's in the Irish music circle. She's like a superstar, something like that. So it's a sort of niche music genre. But
And how long did you work at the store?
I don't remember exact. Couple of years, 3 years.
Couple of
something
years.
like that, yeah.
In that time, did you meet any? Because I know many of your friends were very interesting people, and many of them had an influence in your life in some way.
Yeah.
Did you meet someone in the store that was maybe interesting or became a connection that maybe stayed with you until today?
Yeah, actually, and that's where I get to Japan.
Okay.
So what happened is that these guys, there were a group of guys from Japan that were big fans of Commodore computers and Amiga computers. And they had a club called the Commodore Fan Club.
In Japan.
In Japan.
Interesting.
And they would come to San Francisco to visit, and they would buy these Amiga computers from us and then take them back to Japan with them because it was cheaper to buy them in San Francisco and take them back than it was to buy them in Japan.
Yeah.
And so I started buying the computers and exporting them to them, basically. And so I started connecting up with these guys. And
were these guys businessmen or just
they were engineers mostly, I think. Yeah.
an interesting group of people as well in
Yeah.
Japan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm still in touch with some of them through Facebook, basically. Yeah. So,
That's very cool.
yeah. And one time the whole club came to San Francisco and we hosted this event. And it was a lot of fun.
What was the event about? Just
About Amiga
generally computers, yeah.
And we also, the inventor of this computer was a guy named Jay Miner, and we invited him, and we went out to dinner together and stuff. So it was a lot of fun, It was
that's
just,
very interesting.
there's something else that kind of happened around that time, which was I met some musicians who were really interested in not commercial music, but in free music, like just
making music for
just
the public
making-
for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but not commercialized. Not
Yeah.
I mean there's just sometimes crazy stuff or improvised stuff or just wacky stuff.
And they
And-
wanted to get this out to the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was called the Haight-Ashbury Free Band. And there was no leader of the band, it was just whoever came. But there was one guy who was kind of one of the centers of energy of the
Band.
of the band,
Yeah.
because he hosted it at his house, and he was a very good musician himself. He played the piano.
Do we know him?
His name is Nick Porcaro, and he lives in New York now, in New York City, and he and his partner went on to found a software company called M-Forte, which is a software for iPad that is basically you can turn your iPad into a musical instrument. So, and they've done extremely well, So,
Interesting.
I mean, he was an engineer by training, but he was also a musician. So, and
I like how this is always happening, that the people you meet have both sides, not only just like an artistic side, but also like a background in engineering or technology or just a scientific mind as well.
it's really, I love that, I love
Yeah.
the fact that, I mean, the basic theme is being spontaneously open to trying new things, meeting new people, experiencing new things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a hippie ethic, right?
Yeah.
Be open, take the open road, allow things to happen that you don't expect to happen. You might have a plan, but don't hold it with a white knuckled grip.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, now we are still at the event with the fan club from Japan.
Right.
You exported the computers.
Yeah.
Are we talking about a better financial situation for Rob at that time?
Well, I was making a little bit more money in the computer store, but then what happened is the guys from Japan invited me to come visit them there. So I said, oh, why not? So I went to Japan very briefly. I think I was there for 2 weeks, not very long.
Mm.
But I just said, I want to change my life in some way. So I did this kind of crazy thing. I had some names and some cards, and I would just go to these companies and go in the door, these small companies, and I would walk in the door and I would say, I want to talk to the, boss, or I want to talk to the guy who runs this company, or the whoever.
Okay.
And I would say, well, I'm here, I want to do something. I don't know what. And they would kind of go, who is this guy? Why is he bothering me? And they took me to this club took me to this magazine, which was called Login Magazine, and it was a computer game magazine. And I met the editor of the magazine, the head editor, and I said, why don't I write a column for you? I'll write because I was writing magazine articles in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And every month you can publish my article under my name. So he said,
why not?
Yeah, why not?
Sure.
So I went back via Taiwan, I went back to San Francisco, and I said, how am I going to write it? How am I going to get it to him? So I bought a fax machine because we didn't have email at the time. We didn't have
We're in
internet.
At the end of the 80s? Beginning 90s?
End of 80s, yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. So I would write these columns in English and take a couple of photos, and then I would send them to him via fax, and he would translate them into Japanese and put them into this magazine.
Interesting.
So as a result of that, this guy in San Francisco, a guy named Tom Randolph, contacted me. And, I met Tom because the Free Band, who was doing this music that was a sort of combination of technology and music, they became involved in an Amiga computer festival.
Okay.
And they were playing music at the festival. And this guy, Tom Randolph, his mother was Japanese and his father was American. And he offered me a job. So I ended up working for him. And what he had a company, Fujitsu in Japan, made personal computers.
It's still
the same Fujitsu that's still alive today.
Okay. He's the regional manager right now, or
no.
Okay.
No. This is a long time ago.
Long time. Okay.
So Fujitsu made personal computers, and at that time, personal computers were running on DOS, right?
Yeah.
And personal computers were IBM PCs and
Macintosh?
Clones of, Macintosh was coming around in that time. It had its own operating system. And that Macintosh was starting to come out with I don't even know if Mac was available yet. I guess Mac was available in around the late 80s, yeah. Anyway, Fujitsu had a computer that was the first personal computer that had a built-in CD-ROM drive. And CD-ROM was a pretty new technology. We would listen to music on tape. Before that, we would listen to music on LPs.
Tape.
So CDs started become interesting because because they were digital. Tapes were not digital, and because they were on these little pieces of plastic, and so. And the other thing is that hard drives were really, really expensive. If you
The
wanted
type of hard drives we have today.
yeah, that's sort of the same. Yeah, I mean, but hard drives in those days, cost like thousands of dollars for a few gigabytes, something like that.
Damn.
We're not talking about 5 terabytes. We're talking about
Gigabytes.
5 gigabytes for $2,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And a CD could hold 650 megabytes of data, and so you could put music on it. You could put
Pictures.
You could put pictures.
Videos.
You could put little videos and things like that. Yeah. So Fujitsu got interested in these, but what they were interested in was computer games, and because computer games had a lot of pictures and graphics and videos and things like that. Fujitsu wanted to, all the big computer game companies were in the U.S., mostly in California or Texas. And Fujitsu wanted to get those games ported over into Japanese so that they would run on this Fujitsu computer. And so so this guy, Tom Randolph, started a company that was, their responsibility was to find game developers and to convert these games into Japanese. Exactly.
When you mean port, you mean translating only, or does
well, it's more than translating. There was also some
change in the program.
Code, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Fujitsu used a proprietary version of DOS, something like that. So they had their proprietary operating system. Anyway, so as a result of that, we were working with different game companies, Electronic Arts and a bunch of other ones, Broderbund. They were all the big companies that were making the games at that time, Sim City and all those kinds of companies. So suddenly I was in the software business. And I did that for a couple of years. And then another friend of mine offered me another job to work for his company, and he was developing, he had a distributor of computer audio products, from keyboards to music software to sound cards and things like that, which was a new business at that time.
Okay.
And so he was building up this company, and he hired me to work for him. So I did that for a while, and then I learned about the distribution business, and I learned more about computer audio, things like that. So then that led to the next step, which was that I met a guy named Fabrizio Caffarelli. Where I met Fabrizio was from the previous job. Fabrizio was from Milan.
Okay.
And Fabrizio had taken a lot of the great artwork, Italian Renaissance artwork, from Caravaggio and a lot of other.
How did he take it?
He digitized it.
Okay.
Basically.
Took a picture of it.
Today you can take a picture of it with your smartphone.
Yeah.
But we're talking about 1989. There were no smartphones.
So he went personally and took a picture of it.
You couldn't just take there were no digital cameras.
How did he do it?
So I'm not exactly sure of his process, but I think he would have to somehow take a regular photo of it and then lay the photo down on some kind of scanner or something like that. So it was a fairly manual, intensive process.
Okay.
But he did this, and he developed a software where you could watch all this Renaissance art on your computer and from a CD.
Interesting.
And because it was photos, it took up a lot of memory, so they didn't want to put it on a hard. There were no thumb drives.
Yeah.
I mean, hard drives were really expensive. CDs were relatively inexpensive, so that was his business.
Okay.
So he sold this product to Fujitsu in Japan, and that's where I met him. Fabrizio his office was in Milan, And he had this idea. At this point, CD-ROMs were not recordable. You could read them. It was ROM is read-only memory.
Okay.
So you couldn't write to them. But a new technology was coming along, which was writable CDs that you could write to. And Fabrizio had this idea that he wanted to be the guy who was developing the software that would write CDs. And he believed that if he were to do this in Silicon Valley, that he could partner up with some bigger company and make a lot of money from it.
Yeah.
So he moved his company from Milan to Silicon Valley, and he brought some engineers over from Italy. And because I had met him before, he offered me a job. So then I went to work for him in Silicon Valley.
Interesting.
So so that's how I ended up working in Silicon Valley. So
That's a very interesting story, but we're not done yet.
no, we're not.
That's a very interesting story, but we're not done yet. So you meet him, you start working on the readable.
The writable.
The writable, I'm sorry. The writable, the readable was still, was there,
Yeah.
but there was no writable.
Right.
Yeah. And where do we go from there?
So
We're talking about the beginning of the 90s or the middle of the 90s?
we're talking about the beginning of the 90s, something like
Okay.
that. I don't remember the exact. Actually, it was 95. It was
95.
I think it was around 1995, something.
Okay.
94, 95, something like that.
Okay.
So the way that you would connect, computers didn't have writable CDs built into them.
Yeah.
So the way that you would connect you would have these external drives. They were very expensive. And the way you would connect them to a computer was with a type of interface called SCSI or SCSI, Small Computer Systems Interface.
Mm.
And basically, this is before USB. So basically, what SCSI allowed, it had the bandwidth. It had enough. It was fast enough that you could transfer data from the computer to the drive
Okay.
pretty quickly, and you needed to do that in order to be able to write to the CDs. So you needed to get that data out of the computer and into the CD drive, and you needed to do it fast enough to write them.
Okay.
And the company that made the SCSI technology was a company called Adaptec. And Adaptec was a pretty big company. They were, at that time, I think they were doing half a $1 billion worth of business, which by today's standards, I guess is
It's a lot of money.
By today's standards, it's like peanuts,
Yeah.
But in 1996, it was pretty good money.
Yeah.
And they wanted to become a $1 billion company. But anyway, so they made these SCSI connectors that would, and so Fabrizio spoke to them, and he got them. They decided to buy his company. They decided it was a good fit.
So his goal was achieved, technically to work with a bigger company.
Yeah, and to
Okay.
sell his company.
And to sell his company to a bigger company. Yeah. Did he stay after selling the company?
I think part of his contract was he had to stay for a while, and his engineers stayed for a while.
And you stayed also?
I stayed. Yeah, he brought all of us over with him.
Okay.
So that was pretty cool. He also brought, we also got some stock options, which was cool,
That's great.
So, yeah. So it was pretty fun. And I still lived in San Francisco. So I was driving every day from San Francisco down to Silicon Valley. On a good day, it's about an hour.
On a good day.
But there are never any good days. So.
How long was the drive? As an everyday drive?
Probably
2 hours?
an hour and a half to 2 hours, yeah.
Damn.
One way.
Down.
So, and we didn't have podcasts at that time,
To hear on the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I noticed as I was driving down is they would have these big billboards on the highway. And one day I was looking at one of these big billboards and it said Google. I said, what the hell is a Google?
Wow.
I don't know what it is,
Wow.
And so, just these startups that at that time they were startups. and they would be advertising, you know, and you go, what is that, you know? And little did I know that it would become this, you know, what it is today.
Yeah.
So anyway, so so I'm working for AdaptTech, and AdaptTech is developing this software that will write to CD drives, writable CDs, and writable CDs are starting to take off. And then another thing happened around the same time, which is that a company in Germany called Fraunhofer Institute.
Yes.
They came up with a method. So one of the problems with music is that if you take music and convert it into an audio file, it's big. It's too. You can send it through the internet, but
it will take a long time, probably.
Yeah, and also the internet was a lot slower then than it is now, and so it wasn't really a practical way of distributing music through the internet. So what Fraunhofer developed is a new format for compressing audio files into a smaller size.
Okay.
And that format was called MP3.
One moment. They did that?
Fraunhofer did that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, MP3 was a proprietary technology. What that means is that it was owned by Fraunhofer, and
no one else can use it.
No one else can use it without paying license fees for it.
Okay.
Right? Somebody left the source code for MP3 on an open server.
Someone?
Yeah, I'm not sure who.
Okay.
And
no one knows, right?
Maybe they know. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
They might know. But somebody grabbed it.
Yeah.
And put it out into the world. And so now anybody could make MP3.
An MP3. Yeah.
And it was a little bit, you had to, you know, have some technical skills to do it. It wasn't like push a button and it makes an MP3, but anybody with a little bit of technical know-how could do it.
Yeah.
So basically, what happened at that point is that somebody had this idea, you know what, you could take your music collection and you could convert it to an MP3 file. You could put it there on a server somewhere and people could download it. And then they could take our technology, which was CD burning, and burn it to CDs, and they could basically copy the music.
Yeah.
And so then our business went up into the sky.
Did you partner up with companies that made music at that time, and maybe also shows and every audiophile that you can imagine?
The music industry didn't like MP3s.
Okay.
Because basically people were pirating music.
Did they use the vinyl at that point, or
vinyl was going out of style,
or just tape?
Vinyl was still around, but it had gone out of style. Then tape came in, and then CDs came in.
Okay.
So basically, the business was So you made the MP3s on CDs, which made the other, let's say, labels out of business because they got money from getting it on tapes for radios and stuff like that.
The record companies got money by duplicating non-writable CDs, or by duplicating tapes, or by duplicating LPs. And now people were just copying it and sending it to all their friends. We weren't copying it, and we weren't telling them to go ahead and copy it because it's illegal.
You just helped develop the technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So, of course we would say, we don't condone this, but at the same time we were making a lot of money from it.
Yeah.
And we were paying for the MP3, although the MP3 format was readily available for free online, we were actually paying Fraunhofer for it because we had a license.
Okay.
So we were doing it completely legally.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate in many ways for the songwriters who were getting royalties for their songs. It's unfortunate for the musicians who are getting royalties. It's unfortunate for the record companies, but it's just what happened with technology.
Yeah.
So for better or worse, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one difference between like oil and digital media.
Yeah.
Oil, if I sell you oil, I don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
But if I give you oil,
Me
I
the
don't
file.
have it in it.
Yeah.
But if I give you a song, I can still have the song, unless it's burned on a CD, and I have to give you the CD, right? So,
Yeah.
So anyway, the business was going great, and then this guy named I think his name was Sean Fanning. Anyway, he came up with this idea of peer-to-peer networking. So
Okay.
basically what would happen before is if you had an MP3 file and you wanted to share it with a friend, you could send it to your friend, or you could put it on a server somewhere and your friend could download it. His idea was that instead of having one server, every computer would become like
A server.
a server,
Okay.
and that you could then very easily share music with anybody you wanted to.
Yeah.
And that really, the record companies didn't like that at all,
Mm.
you know, because it made it so easy
To pirate songs.
to pirate songs.
Yeah.
And the company that he founded was called Napster.
Okay.
So, so what happened is, I was still working for Adaptech,
Mm.
and then Adaptech decided that our group, our software group, didn't really fit in. So we spun off. We formed again. We were a separate company again.
Yeah.
And the name of our new company was called Roxio. And so we were, apart from doing music and CD burning, we acquired some companies that did video editing, photo editing. So we called it a digital media suite. So we were doing audio, photo, video, the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. And the company that we acquired was in Toronto.
Okay.
So
How was the work between Canada and the USA? Or did they come to the USA to...
it worked
California?
fine. No,
Yeah.
no, they didn't come to. I mean, they would visit us, but we would visit them. They would visit us. We would have, meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
And so we also bought a company in Germany, which was based not too far from where we're sitting right now
Okay.
in Aachen. And the company was called C Quadrat, which means C squared in
Yeah.
German. And that company, I think that their office was at Europaplatz at that time, right, and where that fountain is near here. In Aachen.
Here in Aachen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that company was founded they also made CD burning software, and they were the leader in Germany at that time of that. And Roxio or Adaptech decided that rather than competing with them in Germany, it would make more sense to just acquire them.
Yeah.
So
And they did.
they did. And the guy who founded that company was a guy named Holger Kittel. And he was an entrepreneur. And among other things, he founded a cafe in Aachen called Cafe Kittel.
Yeah.
So you know this cafe, right?
Ah,
So,
interesting.
Same guy. Yeah.
Do you know him
So-
personally?
I've met him. That's been years and years ago. I haven't seen him.
Yeah,
He
okay.
sold his company too. And so so now Adaptech Roxio had this company in Europe, and they needed someone to from the U.S. office to work with them here. So they sent me over to do that for
Okay.
a two-year contract. And that was 24 years ago. So that's how I ended up in Germany. So you asked, how did I end up in Aachen?
Wow.
Sorry, it took me an hour to tell you.
Just an hour. Just a little below an hour. So that's a very interesting story. Just a light bulb every step of the way, and maybe a plot twist in every direction.
I mean, the truth of the matter is that a lot of times with all this change happening all the time, it gets pretty, sometimes you feel like, this is the end, I might as well, jump off the Golden Gate Bridge because my life is over. And then something new comes along.
Yeah.
So.
we do not encourage suicide at all. This is a joke, guys.
That's a joke.
That's
No.
a joke because everyone is a little sensitive nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
This is definitely an interesting story. It's very difficult to just maneuver from something like this to TEDx that we have today because it's only 24 years ago that you came here to Aachen. But I'm pretty sure you stayed in Aachen. That's why you're here today.
Yeah.
And you're part of the team, part of the TEDx team.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Okay. Well, there's a few things in between.
Okay.
I don't want to, if I can keep going. So
You can keep going. We're just a little limited. Yeah, okay, we're not limited.
We're not limited.
We're not limited today. Yes,
Okay,
finally.
I'll try to cut to the chase, but so what happened was that when streaming, when Napster came in and then streaming came in,
Yeah,
the CD market started to crash.
okay.
If you go into, I don't know, MediaMarkt now and look at the CD bins, they're a lot smaller than they used to be. People don't listen to CDs anymore.
Yep.
If you buy a laptop, your laptop doesn't even have a CD.
Exactly. I don't have one. Yeah.
And so with the combination of the iPod and the iPhone and
The Walkman?
streaming, Walkman was not so
Still.
much. That was not so much, but more I would say the iPod and the iPhone and also streaming.
Okay.
It really kind of killed the CD market. And the office that I worked for here started to shrink. And unfortunately, a lot of the engineers that I worked with were, they were let go. And
Yeah.
so eventually the office closed here. My boss in California offered me to continue working here from home office. So I did that for a while. We had an office in England, and I would travel to England frequently to meet with the team there, or else I would go on press tours throughout Europe. I would go to Milan, or I would go to Paris, or I would go to Madrid or different places. So that was really cool. I mean, I really
Definitely.
enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But it was depressing that, our office had closed.
Yeah.
But I was still working, and I was, enjoying it. So then eventually what happened was that the remainder of the company, the European company, was bought by another company. And I won't go through all the details of that other than just to say that it was a company that made streaming codecs. A codec is a encoder and decoder.
Okay.
So it's, say, if you take video, you have to encode it into a file, and then if you want to play it back, you have to decode it.
Yeah.
So a company makes these codecs, and there are
Okay.
different types of codecs, MP3, MP4, H.264, H.265, all these different codecs. They're basically different ways of compressing video and audio.
Yeah.
And this company happened to be based in Aachen, and they are called Main Concept,
Okay.
and they are one of the leading companies that makes these codecs. And so I was getting towards sort of the end of my career in terms of my age, and Main Concept offered me to work there for the remainder of my tenure.
Okay.
So I ended up working in Main Concept, and they're right in the center of Aachen there. So that was fun. And also the other thing about Main Concept is they had offices in Shanghai and in Tomsk, Russia, which is in Siberia.
Yeah.
And we had developers in Zagreb and
Croatia.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they would I got to visit Tomsk, Siberia.
How was Siberia?
It was great. I mean,
Cold?
I went there in the summer. It
Okay.
was pretty warm. And I remember the first time I got off the plane and I smelled the air, and it smelled so good.
Mm.
And I said, well, it's because it's surrounded by thousands and thousands of miles of forest. Right?
Yeah.
And the people there were so great. I mean, they were really nice people. And,
Yeah.
when we weren't working, they would take me around. And I went to Shanghai, and I was like, what a jaw-dropping place that is. That's an amazing place.
Yeah. How did it feel like? just out of a movie, right? A
It's
sci-fi
just-
movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so
You
and
told me there's a difference between the culture
yeah,
of the Russians, for example, and the environment there, and the environment here, and the environment in China. What's the difference that you've seen?
so one of the things that I noticed about Russia was, I mean, this is kind of superficial stuff, but one of the things I noticed is when the women would go into the office, whether they were engineers or whether they were, administrative people or whatever, they would really dress up. I mean, we work in technology, so we're used to people being fairly casual and wearing jeans and
Hoodies. Yeah.
things like that. But the women in Russia, they would wear like, high heels and really, fashionable dresses and, things like that. And I said, what, why do you do that? I mean, why don't you just be more casual? And one of the women told me, well, our parents couldn't do that because they didn't have the resources. They didn't have the money. And now we can do that. So we want to do that.
Interesting.
So, and in China, one of the things that I found really interesting was that all the engineers, they're mostly men, some women, but what they would do at lunchtime is they would all go to sleep on their desk. They would put their head down and sleep for, I don't know, half an hour, an hour or something.
And this would be their break.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they would work very late at night, so they'd get really tired. So then at lunchtime, they would just lie down and take a nap. So right on their desk. So
just wake up and then keep working.
Yeah. But I saw a lot of interesting cultural things in Silicon Valley too. Like, I remember one time that I was talking to this guy, and he was Korean American. He was from Korea, and we started to go into this room, and there was this guy who I think he was from Iran or something like that, and he was on a prayer rug doing his prayers.
Yeah.
And so we walked in, and the Korean guy, who's California Korean guy, he looks at the Persian guy and he says, "Oh, sorry, dude," and shuts the
door. That's so Californian Korean.
Or else you would see a bumper sticker. You'd see this expensive car like a Lexus or something, and you'd see two bumper stickers, and one side would say, KML rocks. It's like the radio station rocks. You know? And the other bumper sticker would be some political bumper sticker about some political thing in India, something like that. So you get all this mix of cultures.
What was your favorite culture or environment, work environment, between Italy and Japan and California and London and here in Aachen or generally Germany?
I really did like the office in Silicon Valley, maybe because I'm American, and it was the home office, so you get some perks that you tend not to get in
other places.
Yeah. Plus, which, German. I love living in Germany, and my wife is German, and I enjoy Germany, but it's just different than California.
Yeah. So. Do you like the weather here? Or do you prefer the one in California?
Sometimes I like the weather here.
All right. That's
San Francisco, can be pretty cold in the summer.
Really?
Oh yeah. We would always laugh at the tourists because they would all be wearing shorts and T-shirts.
They would also do that actually in Cairo, in Egypt, where I'm from. And they would think, it's always just summertime. And then they would go out of the plane, and they would just be surprised by the strong wind. But that's only in Cairo. I don't know. The Red Sea is a lot better. Have you ever been to Egypt?
I haven't. I have been to Egypt to Hurghada, but just to Hurghada.
Hurghada is beautiful, right?
But one of my best friends in California, actually, I met him. He was part of that yoga group that I was.
Yeah.
And he came out to California. Anyway, he's the guy that inspired me to go back to school and do. He studied in Cairo for a couple of years.
What did he study?
Languages, Arabic and things. He was half Arabic and half Jewish, so he was.
Was he studying in the American university?
I don't know.
You don't know.
But anyway, he told me a couple stories about Egypt.
Please.
You can tell me if it's true or not.
Please.
He told me, for one thing, there were two people walking, and one person was walking just a little bit faster than the other one. And the other guy said, "Why are you running?"
Okay.
And the other story he told me was, he said that there's a saying that they would say in Egypt. They said, "Trust in God, but tie your camel."
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's almost like the motto of life for some people, that technically they just like have faith and hope for the best, but also work
yeah.
and not just leave the all of the hope in God that God will make everything work.
All
It's the hope that God will make everything work when I work and put in the effort.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, technically, I don't know.
Yeah.
He studied Arabic in Egypt, in Cairo.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, please.
I don't know if I want to. Well, I'll tell you this. Something horrible happened, though, as he disappeared. He was living in San Francisco, and one day he just disappeared, and nobody heard from him again. Nobody knows what happened to him.
No one.
No one. It's like one of the very most painful events of my life.
Was there a reason why, like, was there any thing that you saw or thing that happened that gave maybe an indication that something like this might happen, or
No.
he just disappeared?
I mean, we were all young and we were all crazy, but he wasn't any crazier than anybody else. You know? It's just.
But he didn't disappear in Cairo.
No, in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, okay.
I mean, I still can go on the internet and find the police report, but nobody ever found him after that.
That's sad.
I have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. If it just those are. I mean, that's the other thing about life is
the stories.
If you have the open road and you open yourself up to things, sometimes bad things happen.
Of course.
So.
Yeah, and let me take you back to Aachen.
Yeah.
You came here and you worked in the office. Slowly but surely, the time goes by and you end up in TEDx.
Yeah, so I retired. So basically what happened was that, I got to be 65 years old and they said, "We don't love you anymore, go away." They put me out to pasture. I was expensive, I was an expensive employee, and they want smart young people like you.
Who are not so expensive.
Yeah. So anyway, I said, "Well, what am I going to do with my life now?" And I thought, well, I have this master's degree in teaching English. Maybe I can teach English. So I started doing that. Then I was really interested in TED. I was watching a lot of videos on YouTube and things like that.
Do you remember your favorite speaker or favorite video?
There's a couple that I really enjoyed. There was one guy, and I can't remember his name, but he gave a talk about creativity and education and things like that. And he was funny. He was really funny. He was really, and I think it's one of the most popular talks on TEDx. I think they have a listing of the popular ones. And,
yeah.
But I can't remember his name. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
There's another one that I really enjoyed. There's a musician by the name of David Byrne, and he was in a group called the Talking Heads, and they were a great sort of new wave punk group. And he was also an architect, studied architecture, and he gave a talk about music and how architecture affects music.
Yeah.
That was really, really interesting. And he was talking about things like, why is punk rock, why did it start in these dingy little clubs, and whereas Bach is in these gigantic cathedrals and churches and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't you play punk rock in cathedrals?
Yeah.
And the reason is it doesn't work in cathedrals. And why doesn't it? It's because the acoustics, there's a lot of reverberation and echo and things like that. And if you play this really fast music, it just sounds like crap in a cathedral.
Yeah.
Whereas if you play, Bach, all the notes are in harmony, and they all even though they're reverbing and they're bouncing around the room, they're blending with each other in a very harmonic way. So it really works. So he was just talking about how different shapes of buildings and different types of buildings really affect the type of music that evolves in those buildings. And I thought that was really a fascinating talk. I really enjoyed that one. There's a lot of them that I liked.
And you liked TED, and you found it here.
Yeah, so I said, I wonder if there's a TED group in Aachen. And so I just Googled it. And remember Google? I saw their billboard on
The
highway.
Google,
Yeah.
the Google ad.
And so I said, well, this could be interesting. I might want to get involved in that. Plus which I wanted to be involved in the university somehow. And I also wanted to be involved with young people who are smart and who are creative and who are doing interesting things with technology, because it's something I've always loved, right?
Yeah.
And so I just contacted the group, and I went to they had a recruiting session, and I went, and they said, yeah, why don't you go in the program group? And so I went in the program group, and they said, okay, now we're going to have our great TED event. And then there was a pandemic.
Oh. What was your favorite memory that you had in TEDx so far? You've been here for?
When did the pandemic start? I don't know.
2020. 2020, yeah.
So 4 years. My favorite memory. The talks are great. I mean, the talks are really the most fun part, right?
Yeah.
I remember the first big talk that I was able to participate in with Vatsal was the leader of the program group at that time. And he was great, but he was really, I called him a cat herder,
A cat?
Yeah, you can
Herder.
you can herd goats, right?
Yeah.
You can herd cows.
Yeah.
But did you ever try to herd cats?
Never.
What happens when you try to herd cats?
They just run away.
Yeah, exactly. So he was trying to herd all of us cats, and and he was really he really cared. He really wanted to make it work, and he did. He pulled it off. But I think he was really right up until the end. He was like, "Oh my God, is this going to work or not?" And it did. So in terms of having the speakers be there on time, in terms of them giving presentations that worked and things like that. So that was a lot of fun.
What did you do in the program team, and what do you do now? When you first joined, and
I'm
your
still
role
in
now?
the program team. So,
You're still in the program team.
yeah.
And what's your role in the program team?
Well, I'm just a member of it. So, and what the program team does is that we find speakers for the events, and then we support them in preparing their talk, and then on the day of the talk, we make sure that they have everything they need and that they're there on time, and everything like that. I mean, so yeah.
Did you enjoy last event?
Sorry?
Did you enjoy last event?
Oh, I love the last event.
The last
It was
event
great.
was very good, right?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
And now that we have spoken about your background in technology and in many other fields, what are you doing now?
So what I'm doing now is I am teaching English. I teach through, as I mentioned, Fachhochschule in Jülich and in Aachen. I'm teaching a technical English class and also a conversation class. The conversation class is like fantastic. I love that. I mean, the other one's fun too, but the conversation, we just sit and talk about everything from artificial intelligence to algorithms and how they control your life to everything to what do you want to do for the rest of your life. Students are international. We have students from Indonesia and Malaysia and Morocco and Tunisia and Russia and all over, and
A very interesting table to sit at.
yeah, and so and they give presentations, and it's just I can't tell you how much I enjoy that class, and I just love that. It's just so much fun.
That's great.
And I still play music. It's my passion, and I play in a big band. There's a music school here in Aachen called MUFAB, Musikfabrik. It's right 5 minutes from here. And they have a big band. And actually, the leader of the big band is a guy named Boris Bonsbach.
Okay.
And he and his partner, who's a woman named Sanaz, as a result of the TED Talk last year, Sanaz gave a talk about music.
Yeah.
And Boris was her partner, and he decided to accompany her, and she sang a few songs. So now they have formed a formal group, and they've been performing around, and they've been quite successful. And I feel very good about that because I feel like I had some little tiny part in terms of getting them to be a music group together.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably would have anyway, but still I kind of maybe gave them a little bit
A
of
little
support.
push.
In it. And so anyway, Boris is the director of our big band, and he's an incredible musician, but also an incredible leader because the level of musicians in the big band, it's a community band. So, we aren't professional musicians, but we have fun with it, and he's able to make it work. So that's, and playing big band music is completely different from what I used to do because I used to play rock and roll, and now I'm playing with all these horns, and they play in the key of E flat, and I can't. You can't do this on the guitar. How dare they?
So you prepared the speakers as well, right?
We do
like
prepare
Nas,
the speakers.
yeah. How do you do that?
So there's a few things. First, we have to vet the speakers. We have to decide who is going to speak. And each year there's a theme. The theme of the upcoming event is connecting the dots. And so we try to find speakers who somehow can fit into that theme. And what we want to do is we want to find speakers who are, first place, where do we get the speakers from? There's different places. Maybe they get referred to us. Yeah, suggestions, referrals. So, for example, maybe you have, a professor, or you have a friend, or you have a fellow student who you think has a really interesting thing to talk about. So you then give that information to the program committee, maybe by email, or I think there's a form online. And so we have this whole list of people who have been recommended. We also know people. And then sometimes people just write to us out of the blue. They say, hey,
I would like to be at the next talk.
So we have this list, and then each week we talk about the list and who's on the list and who might work within the theme.
Yeah.
And if we think somebody's interesting, we contact them and we set up a meeting with them to talk about what they might be interested in talking about, and just to get a sense of whether it would work or not.
Yeah.
And then if we decide that it would work, then we formally invite them, and then we have kind of a process that we go through to prepare them. And the process consists of first they have to prepare an outline of their talk, and then they have to write their talk, and we go through a rehearsal
Prepare
stage, we
it
go through training,
the prova.
things like that.
Yeah.
And some talks, as I mentioned, some talks are really interesting, some talks are less interesting.
Yeah.
So we try to
Some talks are more engaging
yeah.
with the audience.
Yeah.
Some are less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have personal opinions about what makes a talk engaging. Not everybody agrees with me. You want to know, huh? Okay.
I want to know, yes.
Okay. All right. For me, there are a few things. And I've actually been studying. I also my students at the university have to give talks too. So I've been sort of studying how to tutor people and how to prepare people for talks. And I've been studying some of the great teachers of public speaking. And so there's a few things. The first thing is that I think that our brains are designed to hear stories. I think that's, in one way, the thing that really makes us human, is telling stories. And I think that if somebody gets up on the stage and gives you a bunch of facts and numbers and statistics, it's not very interesting.
Yep.
But if somebody tells you a story, and it can be a story about anything can be an interesting story. I can pick up a glass of water, and I can just tell you a story about how glass was invented and, what happened to the person who invented glass and how they, I can make up a whole story about it.
Yeah.
Or I can just say, well, a glass is a clear material that allows light to go through it.
Or like
Pretty
today,
boring.
when I asked you how did you end up in Aachen, Germany,
I told you a very long story.
a good story that we all wanted to hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, stories are the first thing. And just to sort of put this in perspective, going back, 20 million years or whenever the human race first evolved, the way that most animals acquire their food is that they look at what's in front of them and then they try to eat it. you
Yeah.
know. Or they chase it. If they're a carnivore, they chase it and they eat it. If they're an animal that eats vegetables, then
Yeah.
they just browse around and eat it.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 20 million years ago, some woman or some man or humanoid whatever
Mm-hmm.
said, you know what? Maybe we really like to eat whatever. We like to eat goats.
Yeah.
But there aren't any goats around here. Maybe there's one over the next hill. And, I never thought of that before. So they told this story, and they had in their mind, there's a picture. There's a hill, and on the other side there's a goat. And they started imagining it. And then they said, well, let's go over the hill and find the goat. So that was like a story. And then that's where human beings came from, right? We started telling stories about things. So then the question is, what is a story? And there are a lot of theories about what a story is. But one of the theories I like is that there are only two stories in the world. There's only two stories.
Yep.
One story is that there's something that you don't have and you want. And you want to get it. So you have to go on a journey somehow to get it. And on that journey, there are things that get in your way. There are obstacles. And you have to somehow overcome these obstacles. And finally, you reach your goal and you get what you want. So that's one story. The second story is that you're trapped. Something is trapping you. Something is putting you in jail, or something is causing you problems, and you want to escape from it.
Mm.
And so you think about, how can I escape from this? And so you have to overcome different obstacles until finally you escape.
Yeah.
So those are two stories. Okay. So story is one thing that's really important. Another thing that I think is really, really important about giving a good talk is that you're having a conversation. And you're not having a conversation with the audience. You're having a conversation with 250 or 300 or 350 individuals. You're not having a conversation with this big, massive group. You're having a conversation with
every single person.
Every single person.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, it's really hard, because if I'm right now, I'm having a conversation with you, and I'm facing you, and I'm looking you in the eye, and I'm talking to you like that. You can't really do that with 300 people.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can find a few people in the audience, somebody over here, somebody over here, and somebody over here, and they represent all the other individuals. And I can have a conversation with you, and then I have a conversation with you, and then I have a conversation with you. And then I have a conversation with you. So I'm having a conversation with just a few people, which is not that hard.
Yeah.
But it's
still manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving you a lecture. I'm conversing with you.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. Another thing that I think is really important is vocal dynamics. And by vocal dynamics, I mean a few things. One is, your tone. So sometimes you can talk higher, and sometimes you can talk lower. When you get excited, you tend to talk higher.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are more calm, you tend to talk in a lower voice. But if you're always talking in the same tone of voice, it gets very boring.
Yeah.
Right? And pacing is also very important. So sometimes you talk slowly, and sometimes you talk really fast. And when you get excited, you talk fast. And you can switch that. And I think that if you change your pacing. That's a kind of vocal dynamics that makes your talk more interesting. Another thing that I think that is really important
Is pauses.
is pauses. Because what happened when I do that? What happened just now when I did
Grabs attention.
Yeah, it grabs attention. Miles Davis is a jazz musician, a very famous jazz musician, and he said the silence is just as important as the notes. And there's another jazz musician named Wynton Marsalis, and he said the emotion happens in the silence. You're giving people a lot of information, and if you just keep pouring on the information, it doesn't give people a chance to process it.
To internalize it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think those kinds of vocal dynamics are really important. Obviously, if you're excited about your subject and you're passionate about it, it's really important. I think it's also, people get nervous, right? And one of the things that I think it's completely okay to do is to just tell people that you're nervous. So if you're standing on the stage and suddenly you're like, oh my God, all these people are looking at me, just say, you know what, I'm really happy to be here, but I'm scared. So, and that humanizes you for them. Nobody judges you about that.
Yeah.
What they do is they say, oh, this is a person. They're not like somebody standing up on the stage. Who's,
Yeah.
So, there's a whole bunch of things you can do to give a compelling talk, but those are just a few ideas.
I mean, these are not only tips for a talk, these are tips for a presentation for everyone listening. These are tips for talking to maybe your family at a gathering, for any group of people, not just a talk. You don't have to be on the stage for a TED Talk in Aachen, at the RWTH Aachen TEDx team. You don't have to be that. You can just give a small talk to people, and you can use the tips Rob just gave you, right?
That's right. And by the way, those are not free. You have to send me. I'll give you my PayPal address.
You're gonna find it in the description. Rob, I want to say thank you for being today in this episode. Thank you for being with us today. We're really happy that you came and accepted our invite.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've really, really enjoyed this, and it's just, I can't tell you how much I enjoy being part of this group and, being with these smart, creative people.
Would you like to say or send a message to the listeners today?
My message is that everything, how do I say this? No matter what happens, something else will happen after that. So just
relax.
Yeah.
Relax and enjoy the ride.
Yeah. And like we hippies say, peace.
Peace. Rob, again, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And we hope to see you again for a second round.
I have.
Maybe there are more stories, more controversial stuff to talk about. And thank you for listening, guys. Everything we mentioned today, whether it's the event, our Instagram page, TikTok, or anything else, you're going to find in the description below. The talks you can find also on our webpage. Thank you for listening and tuning in. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to see the other episodes, and we're going to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Or peace.
Peace.
Peace.